What's up, Region 4? I'm Jeremy Chance here with the Region 4 Communications Committee, and here we are with another edition of our COVID Conversation Series, where we're sitting down with some of our colleagues across the region that have already reopened a facility just to discuss what life in this new reality is. So today we've got our colleagues from Wichita State here in the state of Kansas, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Karolina?
Yeah, hi, my name is Karolina Mosa, and I'm the Associate Director for Facilities, Reservations, and Student Personnel.
And I'm Luke Mozena, the Graduate Assistant of Facility Operations and Student Development.
Awesome. Well, we certainly appreciate your time here today. So we'll go ahead and just dive in. Just why don't you talk briefly about what are some of the large scale changes and more significant changes that you made to the facility, to your training for life reopening after and during this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the main change that for our facility was we had to reduce our hours. We have reduced summer hour because of the summer, but we changed it to have kind of so we can manage cleaning and everything like that, which in turn reduced the hours for our student employees. So they had less opportunities to have shifts and get money that way. We also, our university requires masks in all university buildings. So that was a big change for us. So our student staff's wearing masks, patrons are using masks, except for they have an exception in the workout areas and the activity areas where they don't have to wear a mask, but any common areas, masks are required. We had to socially distance all of our rooms. So our fitness studios, our dance studios have room requirements. So there's no more than 10 in our fitness studios, 15 in our weight room. So we socially distance our weight room. We taped off areas that are 6 feet apart. We opened an esports hub that was really popular in the fall. We have 20 computers through there. We socially distanced them, so now we only have 10. And they have to check out our keyboards, mouse, and headset. Instead, we used to just keep them there and clean them at the end of the night. But instead, we check them out and clean them every time they get used. And then when we originally reopened, we weren't allowed to have basketball or racquetball. And then once we moved into phase 2, we were allowed to do half-court basketball. So we dropped our volleyball net on our basketball courts to kind of separate so we can't play full court. We have limited equipment rentals just because most of our like racquetball and stuff wasn't originally open, so we didn't originally check that stuff out. And as far as our facility, those are kind of the big facility changes we made. Staffing wise, our professional staff was put on a schedule that we staggered days. And our student staff is just when we're open, so the reduced hours.
Sure. How, Karolina, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. What has the general response been from members and students and people coming in to some of these changes? Are they understanding? What's the general response been?
Yeah, we've been pretty lucky with members and student staff. Everyone's been accepting of all the new policies and regulations and whatever we request them to do. We try to give them as much heads up about any new policies or anything that will be changing in terms of capacities. So I think keeping that communication is important. Even though it's a much slower time for us. Usually summer is already slow, but with this whole situation, it's even slower. But we still have plenty of people coming in during lunch breaks and evening times after work. So they've been really understanding and always complying with everything we've been doing. So we haven't had any major disappointments or complaints from members or students.
Perfect. As you and your team are starting to have those conversations about reopening, what were some of the challenges or barriers or hurdles you had to kind of overcome in the time to lead up to reopening?
Yeah, I think some of the struggles came from different policies and regulations that were changing daily, weekly, and just keeping up with that. Prior to opening, 1 week we hear this, the next week we hear the other thing.
Right.
The capacities, the public gathering numbers are different. So it was just, a very flexible time for us to like make those flyers, you know, make sure that we are putting the correct numbers, that we're putting correct information. And, you know, within that, we had to really deal with like state government, county, and then
Right.
the WSU University has their own policy regulations that they are putting together. So really trying to comply this all, put it all together and make sure we are in regulations with everyone.
Sure.
So that was something that definitely was a challenge, as something that we had to look daily and update ourselves and our staff on what's going on. We definitely went above and beyond to meet all the requirements, and we wanted to do more
Sure.
than do less, you know, and then so we can scale down when we need to. So our team, when they were looking at, you know, all the regulations and when the student staff comes back to campus to work, let's do everything extra and then scale down.
Right.
So I think maybe another challenge was students buying into making sure that they are wearing masks.
Okay.
The significance of wearing it, you know, because Kansas wasn't really hit that hard at the beginning. So we did see, you know, people just, you know, sliding their mask down, and then when they see us, you know, putting it way back.
Right.
But I think now with, you know, in our county where it's masks are not required, I see them in masks all the time. So I think it just that push to make sure that they are following our, you know, direction, and also WSU, that was university policy from the very beginning, that everyone needs to wear a mask when they are in common spaces, but they can take it off when they get to activity space. So when you get to the weight room or you get to the gym, you can take it off and exercise without a mask. So
you touched on the needing to be flexible and adaptive. Were there any things that popped up, you know, after reopening that you maybe didn't anticipate or you didn't necessarily see coming? Some of those challenges on the fly that you had to live with and deal with kind of on the fly.
Yeah, so I can talk about that a little bit. So originally when we were going to reopen, we were unsure of what the locker room status, if we could have the locker rooms, and then our saunas are in the locker rooms. So kind of, well, we had to wait to see if locker rooms were good to go, which then trickled down into, is our sauna good? And just kind of waiting to see what we can actually open in the beginning was kind of, I think, the most difficult issue we had. It was just going week to week, like this week is one thing, next week we can open this.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that was the most difficult part.
Yeah, and we, I think I wanted to touch base on this unique situation that we had with our student staff that came up, that we had 5 of our student staff being exposed to someone who tested positive, which was, and it was outside work. So we were in that situation. We were informed by our staff that this happened. So we had to put them on paid leave. So they got paid for the time when they were not working. And they had 2 choices. They had a choice to just quarantine for 14 days or take a test and wait for the result and then send it to human resources, because they were the ones that were releasing them for work when the test was negative. We worked with the COVID-19 team that's created here at WSU. They lead the whole action of and regulations at the university. So they were our first group that we informed and asked for advice, what do we need to do. It was a little bit confusing. It was a little bit challenging because they were not prepared for the situation where students are exposed instead of a professional or a staff member actually being sick. So I think that's something that universities may overlook and not think about when they are looking at those procedures. You know, what happens if your employee gets exposed? So we had to just provide, you know, the team, COVID-19 team, with list of employees that they might have come in contact with, their schedules so they can get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them decided to get tested.
Sure.
So I think this was another challenging part because they all got tested and we were hoping to get those results within the next couple of days
Quickly,
or
right.
at least a week. Well, none of the results came in within even 2 weeks.
Sure. Jeez.
Yeah, we were getting to week 3 where we started getting
wow.
results back.
Right.
And so we were still waiting for the result because HR would not release them to work. So this was challenging for them and for us because we had to cover their shifts. And they were not able to pick up any sub shifts, and they were, in contact with me all the time asking, hey, it's been 2 weeks, can we go back? Can we go back?
Right.
And we really, I had no power to turn HR or anyone else. So yeah, this was challenging and definitely something that we've learned. And we university learned something from this too, because just this week they released the new guidelines for a situation like that.
Sure.
They came up with some documents that you have to fill out, what to do, and stuff like that. So this was a good eye-opening for everyone here. And hopefully we don't run into that kind of a cluster, because it was 5 people in the future, and it's hard to just fill out those shifts every time. So
yeah, I mean, you say unique, but I'm sure there's other schools in our region that are going to experience some type of thing where a student employer, somebody goes in some kind of social setting where they're exposed, and I think it's hopefully our universities have a plan in place. We'll kind of wrap up with maybe one or two nuggets or pieces of advice that you can give to our colleagues in the region. Karolina, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I would advise is to, if you have that, if you can do it, open the building a week ahead to test everything, to make sure that you have everything in place, how everything is going to operate with the new rules, with the new workload that you're putting on students, with cleaning. Do you have all the supplies you need? Are your student employees feel comfortable in what they are doing now? So being in the summer, being slow, we just were able to test it all out, and correct if we needed to correct anything. But if we were going to open in the fall and just right when the school starts, I think it would have been a big mess. So if you can, even few days before, open your building and test everything and make sure you have all the policies in place. Yeah.
Sure. Luke, what you got?
Yeah. So I was going to say that too. Like you never want to rush reopening, but I think we benefited a lot from being in the summer. Due to COVID, it's down. In the summer in general, it's down. So we got to really work with our staff and test what is going to work and what's not going to work. Now, if it was in the fall and we're reopening when the day school starts, I feel like it would be a lot different. We'd experience a lot more challenges. So you don't want to rush reopening, but reopening sooner kind of lets us test out and work through the kinks. And I think we kind of overplanned for what we thought it would be harder to clean the equipment, harder to maintain and enforce these policies. Now it could be way different in the fall.
Sure.
But it was a lot easier than we anticipated opening in the summer. And now that we've done that, I think we have a better grasp of what we can do in the fall.
Awesome. Well, that's all for this conversation. Karolina, Luke, I want to thank you so much for your time. I hope our colleagues in Region 4 will appreciate it. So we'll include some additional information as well as their contact information if you want to reach out and ask any follow-up questions. But thank you all for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy.